Hi, this is Randall Schwartz, host of Floss Weekly. This week, Dan Lynch joins me. We're going to be talking about Flogo, which is a way to do your Internet of Things devices with the best performance and smallest code size. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Floss Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Floss Weekly with Randall Schwartz and Dan Lynch. Episode 455, recorded October 18th, 2017. Flogo. This episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Home plays a big role in your life. That's why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. It lets you apply simply and understand the entire mortgage process fully so you can be confident that you're getting the right mortgage for you. Get started at rocketmortgage.com/floss. It's time for Floss Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randall Schwartz, Merlin at StoneEdge.com, bringing you each week the movers, the shakers, the big projects, the little projects, projects you may be using every day and not aware of it, projects you might want to download right after this show and go play with. I imagine today's might be one of those. Joining me today is my wonderful and talented and lovely co-host, Dan Lynch. Dan, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's good to be here. It's nice that you could swing by in the boat and the ship and pick up the host chair again, Randall, on your way home. So that's good.
Yes, and Dan's referring to the fact that the last 2 weeks, and the reason I've been absent, is that I was on a wonderful 12-day cruise ship in the Adriatic Sea. I'll talk more about that at the end of the show. I'm speaking to y'all. You might recognize my background as my my home. I'm back in Beaverton again, so I won't be here next week. I'll be actually in Raleigh, North Carolina, trying to do the show from there with my hotspot again, or hopefully good hotel Wi-Fi. Dan, where are you speaking to us from?
I'm in my usual lair in Liverpool, as you called it. So yeah, I'm in my spare room, stroke office, in the northwest of England at the moment.
Awesome. And Dan, I want to thank you for your wonderful hosting job last week. I know you might have been a little nervous about taking the big chair, since you hadn't done it in 4 or 5 years, right? So it's been a long time.
Certainly, it's 2 years, 2 or 3, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. But
it's good. It's daunting. Yeah, it's daunting, but it was good. Well, it was good.
But, I like people like you and Aaron who have both done frequent hosting to actually take the host position when I'm gone, because I can kind of, trust that you're a little more familiar with how the process all works. So that's good. And so thank you for hosting last week, and thank you for co-hosting this week. So this week we have an interesting project that I only vaguely understand. So this will tell you how good your elevator pitch is on your website, guys. So we have the, where did I put my notes? It's down here. So it's Flogo. Flogo, they promote themselves as building IoT applications that can run on edge devices and quickly integrate them with IoT gateways and cloud services like AWS IoT or Microsoft Azure IoT Hub. And I only understand 3/4 of the words in that particular sentence, so this will be fun. And the lightest way to connect to IoT devices, up to 20 to 50 times lighter than Node.js or Java Drop Wizard. Well, I know what Node.js is. I don't know what Java Drop Wizard is. I have plenty of questions for our guests when they come on. And it's ideal for today's world of small IoT devices and pay-as-you-use cloud infrastructure metering. The guests are going to be Matt Ellis and Frank Martinez, who are both work at TIBCO Software, who is the sort of host company for this, and are sort of coordinating all the projects there. Frank is the principal architect there, and Matt is the senior product manager. We'll have them on in a second, but Dan, what's your take on this so far?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who watched the show or listened to the show last week will know I did an awful job because I didn't know anything about what was coming up. So I did a terrible job of trailing the show this week. So I should probably apologize to the guys for that. I have done some research today, and I've been looking into some of the stuff. It would be good to talk about how this, because the IoT seems to be really popular, but it's the cloud and the IoT cloud stuff's getting really popular now. So I can't claim to be an expert, but I have some friends who are experts, so maybe I can channel some of them and get some questions as well. But it should be really interesting to find out more.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll have some people in the chat room that are really good at all this stuff too. So that'll be kind of fun. I mean, here's my understanding of IoT, having talked to Aaron about it many times, is that it's the Internet of Things. It's having small devices like, have your refrigerator actually talk to the internet and order things when you're running low on milk and stuff like that, or also having these hobbyists like Raspberry Pis and things like that. So I'm guessing that this is going to be some way to develop software for those kinds of devices. So again, this is all pure conjecture. So I know the first 12 questions I have to ask these guys is to explain all this to us, which is good. That's what we have the show for. I learn things every show, just like everybody else does. Awesome. So we'll bring on the guests in just a second, but before we do that, this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. The mortgage experience wasn't keeping up with the times. It was dated and it needed a client-focused technological revolution. That's why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. Rocket Mortgage gives you the confidence you need when it comes to buying a home or refinancing of your existing home loan. It's simple, allowing you to fully understand all the details and be confident you're getting the right mortgage. It's convenient. Their trusted partners allow you to share your financial information with Rocket Mortgage at the touch of a button. It's powerful. Whether you're looking to buy your first home or your 10th, Rocket Mortgage is able to perform thousands of calculations in seconds. Based on your income, assets, and credit, Rocket Mortgage can analyze all of the home loan options for which you qualify and find the one that is just right for you. Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Apply simply, understand fully, mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/floss. That's rocketmortgage.com/floss. It's an equal housing lender licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030. And we thank Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans for their support of Floss Weekly. Now let's go ahead and bring on our guests. Let's start first with Frank. Frank, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi, and where are you speaking to us from?
I'm speaking to you from Raleigh, North Carolina.
Cool. And okay, let's also bring on Matt. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, Randall. How are you?
And where are you speaking to us from?
I am actually in Palo Alto at the moment.
Oh, okay, cool. So, so the first question, and I'll let either of you guys answer this. You can decide who wants to take that. Is give us a 30,000-foot view. What is Flogo, and what problem is it solving?
Okay, I can take that, and then Frank can add a bit of detail. So first and foremost, we basically say that Flogo is an ultralight edge microservices framework. What that really means is we provide the tools from a framework standpoint, so visual development environment, where you could visually model your applications. Provide the tools for you to develop and build applications, compile these microservices, these applications, down into statically compiled binaries that you can run on an edge device, so on an IoT gateway or something like that. But we also introduce the capability to take the same logic or similar logic and then compile that down to a microcontroller, so you could actually flash the microcontroller with specific application logic that you built in a visual environment using Project Flogo.
And do you want to follow up on that, Frank?
Yeah, basically, one of the things that I'd like to say is that I've worked classically at TIBCO doing process integration and business process management. So kind of some of it is derived from that, this whole way to graphically create your application. And so you don't have to rely on kind of hardcore, low-level code in order to do things. And it's especially useful in things like IoT, where if someone wants to create something, they don't need to know C++ specifically and to get something going. So this will help you create those applications easily and in a nice kind of web UI.
Okay, well, I keep hearing the word edge devices. Can you explain more about what that means? Did I get it right? Is it like the refrigerator thing and the toaster controller and like that?
Yeah, so fantastic question. So yes, you did fundamentally get it right. So I would say that the phrase IoT is kind of overused and misused in many ways. You were right at the beginning of the show. You said it's the Internet of Things, and it very much can be the refrigerator. It can be the coffee machine that's network connected and controllable via your mobile app and things like that. But also in an industrial setting, it could be sensors that are connected to oil pumps in a well that's out in the middle of nowhere, sucking oil from the ground. So it is fundamentally, in the case of an edge device, it's fundamentally a device that's sitting out at the edge, in the sense of like your refrigerator or in an oil field or something like that. So it's really if you think about it, the evolution of computing kind of went, clients, and then client server, then things moved to server, then things moved to cloud, and then there's this evolution of things starting to move back to the edge and running on the device itself. So basically running application logic where the data is produced.
Well, now I was thinking that all these devices run a very small version of Linux. Am I accurate in that, or is this now we're in a new era?
So yes, so something like here I've got actually a Pi in my hand right now, and that's running Linux. It's an ARM-based device. I think it's an ARM v6 for the Pi 0 or v7 for the Pi 3, and that's running a version of Linux. But there are devices, say the Arduino, like an M0, an ARM M0 as an example, that does not have an operating system. So you've got flavors of both. Obviously, if you have an operating system, you've got more control and flexibility to do more advanced things. But if you don't, then you're limited. And if you're, say, doing an M0 or deploying app logic to an M0, then you're definitely limited to the kinds of app logic that you can deploy. But again, with Flogo, you can build that application visually and deploy to either platform.
Okay, so there's probably a lot of players in this space. What makes Flogo different?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, if you do look at the landscape of different players that exist, obviously a lot of the other players have actually taken existing technologies and they tried to retrofit it to work in an IoT sense. So take the case of a Java framework or something that's built off of the JRE. Clearly, that's incredibly powerful. You can do all kinds of things with Java apps. But if you take that application and you deploy it to an edge gateway or an edge device that has a limited set of resources, then you're fundamentally consuming all of the resources with your Java app and your JRE and all the other OS dependencies that are required. Where in the case of Flogo, Flogo is actually built using Golang. So the binaries are statically compiled, roughly 10 to 50x smaller or lighter in size. So if you take that app and push that to a device now, you're saving system resources either for more applications or additional logic or more advanced logic, and then also the ability, that exact same application model, to compile to a microcontroller where you've got 32K of available space.
And one of the cool things, I guess, about Go is that you have in Linux, you would have had to fork separate processes typically to have multiple things going on at a time. Go has this Go routines, I think it's called, that has it's like threads in Go, right? So that you don't have to have all the overhead of full Unix processes to do multiple things at a time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then the other beautiful benefit of Go is the cross compilation. So I can compile for ARM, Linux, x86, Mac, things like that. So you've got a wide variety of different platforms you can build from the same code base.
And what's the history of this project? How did it get started?
So interestingly enough, the project just celebrated its first birthday last month. And basically, it kind of got started by us looking at the landscape of IoT integration projects that existed today, and we kind of took a step back and we said, essentially, that story that I talked about from a bloated framework standpoint, we essentially said, listen, if you're really going to tackle IoT and do it right, then you need to build a solution from the ground up that focuses specifically on that particular problem case, with the requirement of needing to be lightweight, needing to be performant, needing to be easy, So that's kind of how it started. As far as why we picked Golang and things like that, I'll let Frank jump in there.
Yeah, as for why we picked Golang, so classically at TIBCO we've been very Java centric. We've been doing Java for a long time, but when we started this, they go, okay, we want to start this fresh. We want to keep an open mind, and so then we started looking around at modern programming languages. I must admit, though, we did keep one bias, that we wanted something statically typed language, because we wanted to ensure to catch as much issues as we could at compile time, especially since we're having third-party contributions into the framework. So we started looking around, and with that constraint, we came across Go, and it kind of satisfied that. But then there's the other things that Matt mentioned, the fact that we can statically compile everything. And one nice thing about Go is that it compiles extremely fast, much faster than Java, so it's not a real burden if you are doing compilation. And it has other nice things like memory management and garbage collection. And at the end of the day, since everything is small and self-contained, it's much better than Java, that brings along the baggage of a GRE, and also interpreted languages. It'll bring some sort of interpreter, like if you're using JavaScript, you bring along Node and things like that. And yeah.
And one of the best things about Go is it's not Java. As long as you get away from Java, you're already making up 5 steps forward. I tell you.
Yeah.
Every time I sort of imagine that I want to learn Java, I start looking at it and I go, ugh, how do people work in this language? I don't understand it at all. So this is a project of TIBCO. Can you tell me what else TIBCO does, and are they all similar projects to Flogo?
Sure. So TIBCO is an enterprise integration vendor. So we build software mostly focused or specifically focused for the most part on enterprise integration problems. So B2B integration, and then we've got another set of technologies that we do that focuses on event processing and stream processing, as well as some visual analytics tools. So TIBCO has traditionally been a closed source vendor. We produce software, as Frank said, mostly all in Java. And we license this to the large companies. This is definitely a deviation from TIBCO's traditional software development cycle, where we kind of took a step back and we said, you know what, we genuinely believe that innovation will happen in the open source world with the community. It's not going to happen by locking 10 engineers into a room and produce software. It's going to happen in an open way, and it's going to happen via the community. So Project Flogo was really the first real open source project, BSD 3 license that TIBCO released. And the idea behind this is really that we leverage the innovation that fosters in the community to produce other commercial projects, So the open core technology that is Project Flogo does drive other commercial projects that TIBCO is selling as well. But fundamentally, this is a radical shift, 100% open source. And as I said, BSD style 3 license, so pretty permissive.
And given that it's open source, have you noticed more rapid development? Is your community assisting you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the community is assisting. It's to be quite honest, it just like any other open source project, getting the community on board is something that takes a bit of time, but it's starting to accelerate. Which is good. So the community is assisting. And from a feature set standpoint, I would absolutely say we're moving at breakneck speed. I mean, we're adding features to this project at speeds that TIBCO or most enterprise vendors have never done before. So that's something that I really enjoy about the open source way of developing software. So Flogo is very much developer preview right now, right? I mean, our documentation kind of stinks, and there's things that we're improving and what have you. But it's very much developer preview, adding features left and right. Q1 next year is where we kind of take a step back and we say, okay, let's work on documentation. Let's get this to the point where the mainstream dev can take it and really have fun and build powerful apps with it.
So I was actually going to compliment you on the documentation, because I was reading through it today and having to play around with some of the command line tools, and I thought it was quite good actually. Maybe I already knew stuff that maybe there's some assumed knowledge that I had there. I'd like to compliment myself, I suppose. But I thought it was really good, the documentation. One of the things, carrying on from the kind of open source community angle, I suppose, I was reading about your happy hour initiative, if you want to call it that. So tell us about happy hour. What is it, and how's that working out for you guys?
Yeah, so we kind of, so happy hour kind of came from the fact that, for the most part, some of the, so the way we built the project is we've got a core set of architects and engineers, Frank being the principal architect for that, and we would design features and then push these features out, and we didn't really involve the community all that much. So we took a step back and we said, you know what, let's launch it's supposed to be monthly, but I've pushed the next one out a bit, but basically a monthly happy hour where we engage the community and we do an open design session. We talk about new and upcoming features, and we solicit feedback and support and things like that. So I was incredibly pleased with the turnout of the first happy hour. We had I don't know, roughly about 25-30 people that joined live, and then 100 plus that's watched it on YouTube already. But I'm super pleased with it, and I'm really excited about sharing what we want to do with the community and getting feedback, right? I mean, that's the whole point of open source.
Mm-hmm. And I was curious about whether you've got any plans in the future to have, I don't know, Flogo Con or I don't know what you'd call it, some kind of, and it doesn't have to be a huge, massive event, but some kind of maybe public meetups, like face-to-face, I suppose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when the project becomes more well-known and there are more people adopting it, we absolutely want to do that, especially from a meetup standpoint. That's one of the things that we want to try to target next year is kind of fundamentally bounce around the world, do meetups around Flogo, IoT, open source, Golang, edge computing in general, and really foster a community around tech innovation using Project Flogo.
And in keeping kind of examining the kind of community vibe, I suppose, I was looking at through the documentation and licenses. You mentioned it's under BSD 3-clause license, very well established and well used license. I was wondering about things like governance and so on. So you've got the company which started the project, and then you've open sourced it. Does the company still decide the roadmap and so on, and how does that work, or is there any kind of community foundation or anything that people could, where they could decide to, I don't know, go in a slightly different direction? I'm assuming not.
Yeah, so right now, early on, the company still fundamentally decides the roadmap, but we're very much blessed in the fact that TIBCO's kind of said, listen, you guys take this, you guys run with it. It's community driven, supported by TIBCO, so we're very much taking in enhancement requests and feature enhancements, what have you, right? But fundamentally, we still have that core group of architects like Frank that need to approve changes that happen to the core. And then as you go outward, we have a contribution model where additional people can start adding new capabilities via triggers and extensions and things like that, where you don't need someone like Frank to say, no, we're not doing that, right? That's something that's much easier to commit back to our repo or even add to a showcase repository that we're going to launch later this month, so that your extensions can be discovered as well.
Yeah, and
excellent. That sounds... Sorry, go on.
Sorry, just to add to that, one of the things that we've done is kind of tried to emphasize, if any group within, because Matt had mentioned that we're using it in some commercial offerings, that any group not basically, secretly go, and ask for these features. We want them to put those issues on GitHub and kind of request features and enhancements that way. So everything's out there in the open. It's not, so we're not secretly developing anything and just appearing out there. So that's what we're trying to not keep as much while we are in TIBCO. Try to keep it as much as we can open source fully, and keep that kind of separate from TIBCO in that respect.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. So if I can, I've just, this might be an awful analogy, so please tell me if it is, but I was just thinking, it's kind of like saying, you want to sell cars, but there's no roads. So like, you're not going to sell roads before you sell cars. So what you're doing is building the roads, and the community saying, hey, we'd like a road over here or so on. And then they might buy a car or something like that. Is that a reasonable analogy?
Yeah, it's interesting from a Flogo standpoint. I don't want to sell Flogo, right? I want to build an innovation community and build awesome technology. There are other groups in TIBCO that are using using Flogo as their core to build to build and sell technology. So I'm kind of letting those guys do that, and then Frank and I are focusing on the tech and having fun doing that. So those guys can sell the roads and do all that stuff, and they can use our car if they want to.
Excellent. And a kind of a slightly silly question, and I don't even know if you guys will be able to answer it, but I was curious where the name Flogo comes from. It's quite cool to say. It's a nice word to say. Is there any kind of meaning to that? Obviously, you talk about workflows and so on.
Yeah. So Frank was involved in some of those earlier conversations before I came on board. Did you have any story you'd like to share there?
No. Basically, it started off with doing process flows, and then we're using Go. So.
Oh, okay, right. So it really is
like nothing too complicated, but it worked well. It came off really well, and Matt has had more involvement. I don't know if you've seen our kind of logo, our little mascot.
The bird, I like it. Yeah.
Actually, we've gotten most of our compliments from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bird is actually named Flynn. So a lot of effort's actually been done, and at some point I'll maybe Randall and guys, I'll share you or send you the previous iterations of the bird. It's kind of funny because a lot of effort's been done in that. I mean, little things like if you really look at the bird, you'll actually see that he's looking back at you. I mean, just subtle things like that. And his name is, I think I said it already, but his name is Flynn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you got version control for the bird then, it sounds like? Have you got a Git repo with the logo in it or something?
Funny enough, so our graphic designers do version control it, and Amanda, she's got all of the previous iterations of the bird, so it's pretty funny.
Cool. All right, and so we've kind of, I think we've established the kind of basis of what Flogo is and also a bit of IoT stuff. So I wanted to ask you specifically, Frank, what's the coolest thing that you've seen someone do with this, with your platform? Or is any really interesting kind of applications that come to mind?
One of the interesting things that we're looking at now is doing serverless computing. So the nice thing about right now, if you want to do serverless, actually you'd have to code, but then now you can graphically create serverless functions and put them out there, for example, on Amazon. And it's quite nice because it's a very small footprint, so you can get a very small container, so your costs are small, and then it's just pretty easy to get up there. Especially this whole graphical environment. I think if people adopt it, I mean, some people are also have come across this. Like there's a Node-RED, which is a kind of a Node JS framework out there, which is also kind of graphical programming, but. I kind of like that, and there's also other interesting things that Matt can talk about, that we're doing some ML stuff that he's been playing with, and he's going to actually do something in our conference with it. So, not our Flogo, but our general TIBCO conference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I could just elaborate a bit on the serverless aspect of it. So this is incredibly fascinating. The economics of cloud computing is radically changing, right? So if today you needed to stand up containers or dedicated infrastructure, EC2 on Amazon, for example, AWS, then you do that and you'd pay for that server to be running infinitely, right? It'd just sit there even if you weren't using it. And if you start adopting a serverless compute platform, then you're fundamentally paying for only what you consume, but the real value is the fact that you can infinitely scale, but you can scale back down to zero when you're not using it as well. So if I could provide you a framework to build lightweight applications, and we're talking about a 10 megabyte application that you could deploy onto an IoT device, but also the exact same application, zero code changes, deploy that to a cloud computing platform, a serverless cloud computing platform like AWS Lambda, and run it in Lambda as well. And for example, the cold startup time is only roughly 30 to 40 milliseconds. And execution time is less than 50 milliseconds, then you're fundamentally only paying for, that 100 millisecond block. So if you were building a startup company, you could literally build applications with Flogo hosted in AWS Lambda and pay nothing for that, because Amazon's got a free tier that you could definitely take advantage of, assuming that you're under their the requests per month or something like that.
Yeah, I think Google has a really good program too. That's something like 1 million hits a month. And boy, I tell you, at the time you're getting 1 million hits a month, if you can't monetize it, you're in the wrong business. So I know most of these cloud functions are in JavaScript, or maybe one or two other languages. How does Flogo fit into being able to build a cloud function? How does that work?
Yeah, so we've actually added first-class support for AWS Lambda at the moment, but we will do other providers also. But basically, you visually model your Flogo flows, your applications. You assemble different activities and triggers and what have you. You build the application. When you compile that application, we're actually using right now. None of the cloud function providers have native support for Golang, so we end up wrapping. We're using a Python shim, so we wrap the binary, the Go binary, using Python, and then that entire thing gets bundled up as a zip file and deployed to the function provider. And even with the Python wrapper, you're still at a 23 megabyte footprint.
Wow, that's pretty tiny there. And so when you wrap up the Go compiled thing in Python, does it still have to be properly indented?
So all of that stuff happens with the CLI. So you basically do a Flogo build and you point it to what trigger or the shim that you're using, and then the Flogo CLI takes care of all that and just drops a zip file, and then you just upload that to the provider.
And I had to get the joke question in there first, but I want to go back to the other thing you said. What's the UI? What am I actually looking at or typing? Am I scripting things? Am I looking at some sort of drag and drop visual interface? How does this all work? What's my development flow look like?
Yeah, okay, so you've got a couple options actually. So we do provide a web-based UI environment, and that is a visual environment where it's basically blocks, and you assemble blocks together. You can add transition lines, you can add logic to those transitions, things like that, but you assemble these blocks together, and then you click a block and you've got a configuration pane. That's pretty much it, nothing ultra fancy. But the application model itself for Flogo is actually a human readable JSON file. So we're working on building developer tools where you could use your favorite IDE to do autocomplete, add blocks of JSON that's missing, or suggest different things. So you could go hack at it in your favorite IDE as well, and then get the benefit of things like autocomplete and embedded docs and things like that.
What language do you use for the web interface?
It's all in Node.js based app.
Okay, but even so, do you have JavaScript on client side then to do the drag and drop of things?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
It's all JavaScript client side.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was wondering if you're using something like Angular or whatever, but that's probably...
Well, Angular is the framework that's being used, yeah.
Oh, okay,
right.
Okay, good. Mm-hmm. Okay, just trying to figure out, because I do know a few things about that side of the business, so I was trying to figure out what I could ask that actually makes sense at this point in the conversation. Let me scroll for a second here. I got some other questions I wanted to ask. Are you using any upstream projects other than Go?
So we do leverage a few other Go libs into the project. I don't have any of them, top of mind at the moment, but you could easily find that just looking at the Go code. There's no other upstream framework that we're using. Everything else has been written from the ground up specifically for Flogo. When you look at things like machine learning, so we're taking machine learning, embedding that into activities within Flogo. So the first launch is around TensorFlow. So we're obviously using the TensorFlow APIs and things like that to expose that functionality to Flow developers in a visual fashion.
Now, you said you've been running around for a year. Is this still like an alpha release? Could I put this in production safely?
You could so Yes, I mean we do actually have a customer that a large company out of Asia that's looking at deploying Flogo into their manufacturing floor to do predictive maintenance on devices within the large manufacturing devices within the factory floor.
And so, can I actually? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so I was going to say, so the code base itself is production ready. The documentation is getting better, but there are things that still need to happen to make this more mainstream dev approachable versus the hardcore dev.
Cool. And you mentioned you use GitHub. Are you using the tracker there too?
Yeah, so we do use the tracker on GitHub. To be quite honest, I haven't looked at it in a while.
So if you're not fixed in 3 months. And also, are you? We've had a couple projects recently, sort of disappointingly, that used an internal Git, and then they filter it to get pushed to the external GitHub. Are you actually using directly the external GitHub?
Yeah, we're using the external GitHub. So from a product management perspective, so I could report roadmap stuff back up the chain at TIBCO. I'll use like AHA or something like that to manage the high level feature, and then that gets pushed to GitHub. But as far as bugs and things like that, we create the bugs in GitHub. I mean, actually, funny enough, one of the engineers that's working on a commercial project or product for TIBCO using Flogo sent me a message, and he IM'd me and said, hey, I found this bug and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, create an issue on GitHub. And he's like, are you sure you want me to create the issue publicly? I'm like, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah, we've been trying to emphasize that, and within TIBCO, it's kind of interesting because everybody's so used to doing closed source, and can we put that out there? It's like, yes, but it's like we want it to be as close to an open source as we can get it without completely separating it from TIBCO. So it's like we're trying to adhere to that as much as possible, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that.
Have you ever had a bug filed by an internal employee that got fixed by a customer?
Actually, surprisingly enough, yes. So we've had an issue, an MQTT issue that was filed by an internal developer, and it was fixed by a gentleman out of Spain, actually. So he's not a customer, but he's contributing to the project.
I want to emphasize this because this is something that people don't understand about open source, is that you then get to leverage way more than the resources that you can afford inside the company. And that's why I asked that question, because it's like, here's a perfect example of something that, maybe you don't have the expertise, maybe you don't know how to talk to a particular aspect of one of the cloud functions or something. Somebody internal can just file it, and then somebody who's a lot more familiar with it can come along and say, well, that's interesting to me too, and file the code. So that's really, really awesome. Okay. So I'm looking to see if we have more questions here. So, and then Andromeda in the chat room, we have a live chat room for the show. So they are doing open development versus closed development with open sourcing the release. I guess we already answered that, which is yes. But is there anything to elaborate on that? So
Flogo itself is open source development, open source releases, everything about it's open source, right? From a TIBCO has other products that's using the open core framework, Flogo, to produce closed source products that then are sold. But like I said, I'm not, I don't get much involved in that other than how it relates to Flogo. And then even fundamentally, if somebody internally asks for a feature or enhancement, we evaluate whether or not that makes sense from an open source standpoint. And if it does not, then we suggest to them that they fork it and add it themselves and do what they'd like, but it's not something we're going to add to the project. So project integrity is incredibly important, and sadly to say, it's almost a full-time job, because every time you turn around, someone wants to do something that you're like, oh my God, stop.
So can you say how many people are working on Flogo internally?
Yeah, so we've got a core set of 4 developers on the core framework, Frank leading the team there. And then we've got on a peripheral standpoint, people creating extensions and activities. There's another 10 to 15. And then we've got other groups as well that are working on the commercial products that use Flogo. So somewhere around just under 20.
And have you had more than 20 contributors outside?
No, unfortunately, we have not gotten up to that high yet. So we've got a few really good, solid contributors. It's just starting to ramp up. So I'm hoping, the more the project becomes, from an awareness standpoint, becomes out there and people are consuming it and using it. Maybe we continue to fix up the docs and things like that. We'll get more contributors. We get a lot of people creating issues, not a lot of people contributing backcode.
Well, of course. So one thing I do know from having done this show for many, many years is that you will definitely get a bump in your visibility from Floss Weekly. So I'm glad to have you on at such an early stage in your project. What's primary on your roadmap? What's the next couple or three things that you really want to be working on already, or at least right in the short term?
Yeah, so definitely the serverless aspect. So adding additional framework support. So AWS Lambda is the first that we're adding, but adding additional support for other fast style serverless platforms, and then machine learning as well. So fundamentally, bringing machine learning to the edge. And exposing that in a way that's developer friendly. So to give you a good example, today machine learning is a bit of black magic. So the data scientists do something, and somehow there's some artifact that I could pass data in and I could get a result back out, right? But how do we make that easier for the developer to actually consume? So looking at, simplifying data science prep activities, bringing more machine learning, deep learning framework support to Flogo so that you can run other deep learning frameworks on the device as well. So like I said, we've got TensorFlow support, but we're looking at adding other support for other deep learning frameworks as well. And then and then from that perspective, it's cleaning up the documentation.
Yes.
Yeah, I still maintain I thought the documentation was quite good, but maybe just you can use this on loop. Maybe you can sample this and just put it on loop.
Yeah, we just had someone revamp a little bit of it, and that's maybe what you saw just like a week ago. I think someone internally.
Okay. Yeah, it was. But anyway, I thought it was quite good, but I won't labour the point. It'd be funny if we were to argue over this, and me telling you your documentation is better than you think it is.
Our documentation.
So one thing I was interested in is you kind of addressed it a little bit there. There's a real. So I don't do a lot of IoT stuff directly, but I have a lot of friends who've some of them were actually involved in the creation of the Arduino and other things. So they're real kind of IoT people who've been there from the start. And it feels so. I about 10 years ago, I looked at some of this when it very first was when the Arduino was first coming out and all the rest of it. And it feels like it's really accelerated quite quickly. And there's a big buzz now about there's lots of different companies getting involved. And you've seen like Google at their Google I/O have announced Android Things or Google Things, or I may have got the name wrong, but they're looking at this kind of stuff as well. So how much does that sort of stuff influence, what you guys are doing? Because I imagine you're trying to hit a very, very kind of fluid or shifting kind of base of targets, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. So obviously things that Google and Microsoft and Amazon are doing are very much things that we're in tune with, and we're trying to see how we align to that. But also we've taken a step back a bit and we said, we're not going to try to build an IoT platform. What we're going to do is build an IoT, a framework to facilitate the development of microservices that you deploy at the edge, so on an IoT device, which is different because there are hundreds of platforms today. Which one do I pick? The world does not need another one, but what the world does need is something that will help developers build solid, lightweight applications that are ideally designed for IoT. So that's kind of where we're really trying to focus. And and again, as I said, we're clearly following like Microsoft, Google, Amazon from a machine learning standpoint. How do we align with them from an ML perspective and bring that to the edge in a developer-friendly way?
Awesome. Hey, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to make sure that we had covered everything you wanted to make sure our audience is aware of. So questions for either you or both of you. What didn't we ask that you wanted to make sure got answered?
From my perspective, I think the set of questions was fantastic. I'm very honored to be on your show as well. So I'm pretty happy right now.
Okay, great.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, no, I think you kind of covered a lot of it, and we'll definitely, even though our documentation looks good, we'll enhance it a little bit more for everybody else.
I also presume it's English only for now, right? You probably haven't got it internationalized yet.
No, not yet. No.
Okay,
that's a fair
Something
point.
else on the roadmap. Something else on the roadmap, definitely for sure. So I have to ask two final questions, especially since you're both geeky. I do this in every show. So it's questions for both you. Either one can answer first. What's your favorite scripting language, and what text editor do you use?
Go ahead, Frank. Well, text editors, I use Sublime and scripting language. I don't know. I stay away from scripting languages now.
Well, you can use
my
Ghost.
statically compiled stuff now.
That's true. All right, you probably got it. And Matt, same question.
So I use Sublime as well, and I've actually started using VS Code a lot, more from a larger IDE standpoint, which I rather enjoy. If I'm hacking away at the shell, it's VI and things like that. From a scripting language standpoint, wow. The only thing, it's not my favorite, but it does bring back fond memories building IRC chatbots back in the day using TCL and things like that. So that makes it very warm and fuzzy inside.
TCL, toy command language, yes. I am opinionated about languages I no longer use or didn't care to learn. So yes, I did write way too many expect scripts and some Tickle TK stuff back in the day. So, but that was a long, long time ago, back before Perl got those capabilities, and then I just did it all in Perl instead. It's been wonderful having you guys on. This is a fascinating field. It sounds like you've got a real winning edge sort of new framework for this. I'm glad you made it open source. As a perfect experiment when the rest of your company's software is all closed source. And I still don't know enough about this. I wanted to ask one final question. Can I run these simulated somehow to test it without having to have the actual device or an actual edge device?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm very happy you asked that. So the answer to that question is yes, and you could actually do it through the web browser. So on the trigger, let's say, for example, you have a trigger that's a sensor consuming accelerometer data or whatever, right? You could actually simulate the output through the web browser and then do execute it via the debugger in the web browser, and then even do step-back debugging. So you could look at each activity, the output of each activity, and then can start a new debug from a certain point, and you don't have to run the entire thing. So you absolutely can simulate and do all that right from the web browser. Okay.
And then the question is, because I was just thinking down here at the end, this does sound really fun to play with, but I don't have any way to play with it. So, but it sounds like I do. I'm downloading this later today, and it's going to ruin the next few hours of what I wanted to get done for the day. But there we go.
Fantastic.
So, guys, thanks for coming on the show and talking about Flogo and telling us about this really fascinating area.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Great. That was Matt Ellis and Frank Martinez talking to us about Flogo. What do you think, Dan?
Sounds like a really great project. In a way, I mean, we kind of talked a little about this before the show, but in a way, it's a shame someone like Aaron or Guillermo weren't here who really do this stuff a lot. But I'm going to be telling a lot of my friends about this because I know, as we mentioned there, I remember back in the not too distant days of when, like with IoT, it was basically all C and C++. And that was what you had to do, was rewrite everything for every platform and so on. This sounds like a really, really useful tool.
Well, and wasn't Arduino done in processing or something? Wasn't there some weird language for that?
Oh, it's, I know a lot of the scripts, as they call it. No, not scripts. What do they call them? Oh, it's gone out of my head. It's not recipes. They have this paradigm that they use. Okay. Anyway, I've just hit someone's buzzword bingo there. I said paradigm. It was in C++, yes. A lot of it. Yeah, okay. We used to do a lot of stuff in C++.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's enough of a recap. Like I said, I now that I know I can simulate it, I may be down. Oh, I hate this when they have another good show, and then it's like now I'm distracted. I never get around to doing it before the next good show. So that's kind of crazy. And speaking of good shows, upcoming good shows, next week is Bedrock, which is a distributed database built on SQLite. That's bizarre. I really want to find out how they got that to work. Okay. And then following that, the JFrog Artifactory, which is a repo manager for binary artifacts in your workflows. Crail, which is a high-performance storage and networking things, useful for high-performance computing. OffNet, which is this is going to be cool. It's going to be so cool. So this guy's in Zimbabwe and emailed me and said, I work for an ISP. Almost everybody around here has cell phones, but the speeds of the local service is very slow. But what they found a way to do is to provide a Wi-Fi hotspot that's easy to use, programmable, and would be, say, placed at a restaurant. And that would allow them to connect through to the internet there if they had a higher speed data line. But more importantly, they can put local content on it. So they could have like the menu or the daily special, maybe even order directly from there. So they can actually put these Wi-Fi hotspots that have full web service. And I'll be talking to him in Zimbabwe. Well, I'm not going to Zimbabwe. He'll be there. I'll be by Skype down to there. And what's funny, of course, I said, do you have enough bandwidth for a Skype video call? And he says, well, I work for an ISP. Yeah. So that's not going to be a problem. Yeah. Also, just added to the schedule, Dell has created a new umbrella under the brand of Open Curly Code, Close Curly. Many projects under that umbrella. But Dell is providing all the infrastructure, providing engineering, but they're all open source projects under this umbrella. There's too many to list. It's like 30 projects or something already under that umbrella. So we'll have a guy from Dell talking about how they're contributing to open source. And finally, the last one scheduled right now is Linkerd, which is a transparent proxy that adds service discovery, routing, and failure handling, which is really important now. And we all have these containers that need to be linked together. And this is apparently yet another way to do that. We only have a couple more slots left before the end of the year. Of course, it's getting close to the end of the year anyway, so it's probably makes sense. But one of the slots happens to be my birthday, November 22nd. So hopefully I'm going to fill it with something very interesting because I'm going to have to be working on my birthday. Fine for that. These are all listed on the homepage for the show, twit.tv/floss. If you go from there, you can see a link that says, here's our upcoming guests. And if you have any other suggestions, please tell the project leader or community coordinator to email me, merlin@stonehenge.com. My address is on there. You don't have to write it down. It's go to twit.tv/floss. It's the only part you need to remember. We have a live stream taping typically at every 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, Wednesdays at live.twit.tv, and that follows the rules of the U.S. in terms of daylight savings time, a thing that Dan found out one year, not the European rules. Sorry. Can you follow us at FLOSS Weekly? I know. It's this show. I have such a hatred now for time zones, especially DST. Just please, let's eliminate DST. Please, it would at least make it simpler for me, because when you go from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, they go opposite directions at different times. So when I book a guest from Brazil or something like that, I have to deal with all that. But that's me producing the show. That's what I have to do. That's what I'm doing behind the scenes. Spend about 5 hours a week working on this thing. So that's how it works. Okay. And you can follow us at FLOSS Weekly on Google+. And also tweets over to @FLOSS Weekly. I had forgotten to post anything there for like 3 months. Now I put a little tickler every time that says, please post to Google+ again. You can follow me at Randall L. Schwartz on Google+, and at Merlin on Twitter. And I was, as I said at the top of the show, I spent 2 weeks in the Adriatic. It was a free cruise. That's a long story, but it ended up being my 81st cruise, 652 total sea days. So I've been cruising since 2000, mostly with insightcruises.com, and had a great time once again. A lot of really interesting speakers, A lot of interesting ports. I went to this was also, I got 3 new countries out of this. So I've been in 61 countries now, which is pretty amazing for not having traveled outside the U.S. for the first 25 years of my life. So yeah, that was all cool. And then next week, I will be at the allthingsopen.org conference. We did a show on that about 3 months ago, if you want to find out more about that. And then I'm heading up to Baltimore to visit my friends. So watch my tweets to see if we can hook up on either of those. And then I'm going to be on another cruise through the Panama Canal in January. So I'm not going to be off a cruise for very long. That's all there is. And Dan, what do you want to plug today?
Well, go to my blog, which is danlynch.org, and you can find me there, or at MethodDan, which is my Twitter name. I have started doing, I know Java's had a bit of a bashing today, and I used to once long ago in the midst of time be a Java developer for my sins, and I did Java at university because it was the big thing. So anyway, long story short, I've been looking at getting involved in a project that I'm really interested in for music streaming and so on. But it's already in Java, so if I want to contribute to it, then I'm going to have to get into Java. So maybe one day I can come on as a guest, as an actual developer. That would be nice. But yeah, cool. So I'll write a bit more about what I'm doing there on my blog and so on.
Right. My language of choice these days is Dart because it runs server-side, browser-side, runs on iOS and Android under the Flutter project, and Flutter is really amazing. We had the guy on from Flutter about 3 months ago, and so I'm actually starting to write talks in it. I'm starting to do presentations in it. I'm hoping to do for Dart what I did for Perl, as in have the key seminal books and the seminal trainings on it. So I think I can do that. I think I have some skill at that. So, and the Google people are already happy with me that I'm interested in doing this. So that'll be fun. So yeah, so I wouldn't pick up Java again. Dart's a much easier language to learn, and it has all that same strong typing. In fact, the latest releases are doing inference typing. So you don't even have to say, if you have an int on the right side, you can just say var a equals 1, and it knows that a is now strongly typed as int. So that's really, really slick. Pretty amazing stuff. Really simplifies programming. I wrote about 500 lines of code in Dart on the cruise ship when I wasn't sitting at the bar. So yeah, because you got to decide when to do that and when not to do that. All right, I think we've chatted long enough. Dan, thank you so much again for coming back, and I'm glad that you're back in an occasional host or co-host role. We missed you during the couple of years you were gone, so thanks for coming back, and thanks for doing this.
No problem. It's no problem. It's good to be back, and I'll see you all again soon, I'm sure.
Okay, of course, absolutely. And we'll see you all again next week on Floss Weekly.